So hi everybody and welcome back to the cottage in Ireland. Today I want to talk to you about making shortcrust pastry, which is a standard here in Irish households. In the past, my pastry was relatively successful. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was okay. But in recent years, my pastry has improved a lot. And so today I want to share with you some of my experiences and some of my tips. And the basic ingredients for making shortcrust pastry are flour, butter, water, salt, and sugar. The tools you need for making shortcrust pastry are very basic. You need a scales or some measuring cup, and you need a mixing bowl. And that's it really. When I first started to make pastry, I used to weigh the flour and I used to weigh the butter. And then I used to mix everything by hand. When you're making pastry by hand, you basically rub the flour and butter together until the mixture looks like fine sand or breadcrumbs. The problem with this method is when you use your hands to mix the flour and butter together, you warm the pastry. And when you warm the pastry, there is a risk that the pastry will shrink during cooking and that it loses a certain amount of moisture, of wetness. And so to balance this, you pop the mixed pastry into the oven or into the fridge, into the fridge for about 30 minutes. And this helps it rest and absorb some moisture. The results in my case were often okay, sometimes good, but often not so good really. And so I stopped using this method and I changed the way I made pastry. I then came up with the idea of freezing the butter for a while, for maybe overnight or 2 or 3 hours before making the pastry, and then, ta-da, grating the butter into the flour mix. This works really well. It gives excellent results, but it's messy and it wastes a lot of butter and the butter begins to melt before you can finish making the pastry. And so, although I used this method for 6 or 7 years, I stopped using this method and I no longer make pastry this way either. Now when I'm making shortcrust pastry, I weigh my ingredients. In this case, I need 500 grams of flour, to which I add 1 heaped teaspoon of sugar and approximately half a teaspoon of salt. And I then add half the weight of flour in butter. Which means in this case I need 250 grams of butter to the mix. How good is that? So I then cut up the butter into small cubes and then I bring it to the fridge and place it in the fridge for 2 or 3 hours or overnight. So here we're lucky enough to have enough room in the fridge today to place the bowl and all the ingredients. If you don't have this space, just place the bag of flour and some butter in the fridge for a few hours to cool down. It's also very important not to forget, as I just have, not to forget to place the water in the fridge. So if you bear with me 1 minute, I'll get the water too. And the water's in the fridge. And then you just wait. You can prepare this in advance by up to 2 weeks and leave it in the fridge like this, and it will come to no harm. Before mixing everything together, I just take out some of the flour and sprinkle it on the surface. You can, of course, use flour directly from the bag of flour, but I find this helps to avoid using too much flour later on, because even if I use all of this flour, the balance of the pastry remains unaffected. Now I can mix this by hand. It's cold, the container is cold, everything remains cold. So even if I need a lot of time at the beginning to mix by hand, the pastry will not be warm at the end of the process. However, technology. We use the mixer to mix the pastry. I turn it on to a low setting. As you can see, the mixture is starting to come together, but we still have pieces of butter as large as this. This is maybe a little too large. In the past, I'll just show you, if you stay in here, Christian, sorry. In the past, I always mixed pastry until it looked like this, like fine sand or very fine breadcrumbs. But now I do want to keep little pieces of butter visible in the pastry. In my opinion, this makes the pastry much lighter, sorry. So here the pastry and the butter has been incorporated almost completely, and now it's time to add the water. For 500 grams of flour, we need at least 100 mils of water, but we don't want to add all the water at the beginning, because once the pastry becomes too wet, bringing it back to dry by adding flour makes the pastry, upsets the balance of fat and flour, and it makes the pastry tougher. So as we can see, the mixture is starting to come together, and now we need to be a little bit more careful when adding water. So we add water, let it run for 2 or 3 seconds, stop, check. Check again, add a little bit more water. Now maybe less than a teaspoon every time. And here we can see it's leaving the side clean without sticking to the bowl. At this stage, we can remove the pastry from the bowl and turn it onto the surface, where we do some light folding and bringing the pastry together. This should be quick and light, just like this. And now we shape it and cover it with cling film, and we can put it in the fridge until we are ready. Most people suggest put it in the fridge for a minimum of 30 minutes, but because everything was cold at the beginning and had been in the fridge for so long, we can in fact use this immediately if we are pressed for time. Or we can leave it in the fridge for up to 2 days covered. Remember, if we don't add the water, we can leave everything in the fridge for up to 2 weeks until we are ready to use it. And that's it. I just cover it now and place it in the fridge. So that's it for making shortcrust pastry, and later this week I'm going to be making an apple pie, and possibly later today I'm going to be making a leek and onion tart, like a quiche. And so tune into that video and we'll see how to put that together.